Hello everyone, thank you for coming along. The gallery view. Speaker view. Can you see everyone, Suzanne? Are you good?
I can't, but I think that's my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've got it now. Sorry. Yes, thank you.
You right?
Got it.
Right. So excuse me, everyone, just while we get everyone on to the right place. Welcome. Thank you so much all for coming along. It's lovely. Suzanne has done quite a few zines already, and some of you are probably familiar with those. Tonight we're talking about the isolation portraits. And if you don't mind, I'll just quickly do an acknowledgement of country from the Yarra Valley Writers Festival before we move forward. So the Yarra Valley Writers Festival respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri people, as the custodians of this land. We pay respect to all Aboriginal communities, elders past and present, who have resided in this area and have been an integral part of the history of our region. Thank you. I think Suzanne wanted to say something as well.
Yes, hello. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that I live and work on, and I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And in addition to that, I also just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to my patrons who support me and has helped enable me to do this work.
Lovely. So many of you would be familiar with Suzanne's work, but some of you aren't. I know that there's a few people here tonight that maybe haven't been around Suzanne as much as the others. So I would like to take us back. Oh, who's got their mic?
It's Darren and Pete, I think. Hi.
Okay. It's probably Sean trying to talk, I would imagine. But I would like to take everyone back to Suzanne's main practice when she's not doing projects such as the COVID-19. And just really I wanted to ask you, Suzanne, how would you describe your arts practice generally? Do you see yourself as a social documentary photographer or a documentary photographer? Or do you actually not even give yourself a term?
Yeah, I really don't like being put in a box. So a lot of those labels I like, and I'd like to think I fall in some of those boxes, but I'm really hesitant to put myself or give myself one title, so I just call myself a photographer. You asking about my practice? Was that the?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of different things that I like to explore and document, and I try to do as many different, as many of those as I can to, find ways to explore different settings and people and subcultures, and also to learn different skills as far as using a camera. And I wouldn't say technically because I'm not that fantastic a technical photographer, but how do you take photographs in different settings, and how in a situation that I don't necessarily fit into, can I be there and be comfortable and have people comfortable enough with me to make photos with them. Yeah.
So, and in that, so I'm just going to take from that response when you say you don't go into places that maybe you don't normally feel comfortable, or you wouldn't, possibly go to. Is that what you mean? That maybe your act of being a photographer actually allows you space that you wouldn't normally take up, or you wouldn't feel was yours to take up? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of places I get to go that I would never put myself, or in the past I would never put myself in those situations because there's no reason for me to be there. And I know this is surprising to some people, I'm incredibly shy. So with the camera, I'm not as shy. It gives me a way to engage with people that I would, it gives me a reason an excuse to be able to have a conversation that I wouldn't be able to do without the camera.
And so that purposefulness, almost, I would maybe like to call it. Is that all right with you? It's like that. Does that then inform what you do with the messaging, like in terms of, and does it change the dynamic with those spaces? Do you learn something about yourself, like with yourself, and what connection can be, or and isn't, in terms of the perception of what connection is?
Yeah. So do you mean what I create and then what I put out in the world and around the messaging around that? Is that what you mean?
I do, but I also mean, yes, but also being in that space, when you actually move into a space and you have a purpose to be there,
yeah,
that connection to the space then change your perception of what that space is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then from that, does that re-inform how you would put it into, how you would image it, I guess? Like if you had imagined how the sort of images and the photographs that you would create prior to being in that space,
yeah,
if you actually dared to think about what that might look like,
yeah,
when you're actually there and all of a sudden you're a part of it and you're not an outsider, does that inform the work that you do?
Yeah, it's part of the joy of it is the absolute surprises that I get. So the things that I will find, the things that I will see and discover that I could never have imagined. And in a certain, I might go into an event or a scenario that I have a lot of preconceived ideas about. And when I get into it, it's, there might be an aspect to that, but there's so much more there. And I think going into those absolutely impacts what I will capture. And part of it is, I hate that word journey, but it is a journey to understand more, and to smash a whole, destroy a whole lot of my preconceptions and my judgments about certain things. And part of the drive is to document those for other people as well, to try to dismantle our preconceptions around particular things, whatever that might look like.
So do you choose subjects that are on the fringe, would you say?
Yeah, I certainly enjoy on the fringe. But I also, I think, I probably dwell there quite a lot. But that has sort of become even a much more comfortable place for me to be, whereas a more stereotypical, something I haven't done, but I'd still love to do is like Melbourne Cup. It's that's not on the fringe, but I would feel probably even more uncomfortable in that environment. But I think there is gold there as far as, certainly what I've seen photographed before, and that's, something still on the list. So where a more conservative setting or a more generalist setting would be actually more uncomfortable for me now at times.
Yeah. And allows you that broad documentation of society. So it's not, you're pigeonholing yourself. You're actually, so every time it's a challenge, I imagine, to push through, the various barriers that, an arts process has to have to actually stay dynamic and to be powerful. I would imagine there's always some kind of barrier that, or challenge that you're rising to.
Yes, I think so. And sometimes never quite sure what that will look like at all.
Do you so with that in mind, when you decided to do the COVID-19 project, the isolation portraits that we're essentially talking about tonight, what part of your internal drive, your internal creative process, because I'm going to make an assumption or assumptions here, and so I need you to correct me if I'm wrong, that I think a lot of people, when we went into that first space of complete lockdown, had quite an internal process, like that isolation that we were experiencing, or even if people weren't experiencing it for themselves, they were witness to it in other people. How did that affect your desire to want to do this project? And did you even have it? Maybe am I completely off there?
I had no idea what I was going to do. So I might just say when it impacted us in Victoria, I went, we were in the early stages, and so the amount of gatherings, number of people at gatherings have been reduced. So I went to an event in the Yarra Valley up at the top of Mount Donabuang, which was the downhill skateboarding event. And, that was all what I thought was within, what was okay to do. And then a couple of days after that, we were told that there were some people there who were being tested for COVID-19. So we needed to self-isolate. And so my partner Liz and I didn't leave the house then for, I don't think it was 7 days in the end. And then once they were all clear, so in that time, I really didn't know what to do with myself. And the things I had planned, all fell away. I think I've lost track here now. But I had no idea what I was going to do. And then I think there is a lot of pressure, or I felt a lot of pressure, as I often do when big things happen in the world as a photographer. What am I going to do? How am I going to respond to that? How can I, what can I contribute to this? And a lot of the times, like bushfires, I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to go and into those communities. I didn't have an avenue to do that. But this was happening right here. So I wanted a way, I feel I have a responsibility to try to document that as a local person for my local community. But I didn't really have any idea how I was going to respond to that. And, I took still lifes at home and in the garden and going for local walks, and then met a couple of people along the way. Inevitably took some photos, a woman with a chook and who's, got what's it called, compacted crop or something. Anyway, eggs wouldn't come out. And who's standing in the street holding, a chook in a tea towel, massaging it. And I thought, maybe I could if I could walk somewhere and take their photos, and I could just take photos of people at their front door or in their garden or whatever, like that sort of. And then I went, let's just try that then. And there was, and I did try that, and I organised one to go for a walk to their house and walked for an hour, and then got a text message saying, actually, can we do it next week? And figured the walking wasn't really going to work. So I needed to book them in and drive around. So that then gave me an avenue of a project, and I didn't really have a name for it or what it was going to look like. But I did take a bit more time than I normally do in a lot of processes. And I didn't actually go and make a photograph for 2 weeks, which for me is kind of big. And I did put framework around it, and I did put structure, and I made it really clear to people who were participating that this is going to be the outcome. And if you want to be part of it, I want you to be okay with all of these aspects, which is also not usually how I work. So it was a change for me.
Was that change and that structure from a within or without process? Do you think that there was so much chaos and fear? Because when you started this process, it's really easy to forget that people were mad. Like, we're all mad. That's like, we didn't know what was going to happen here. We were watching terrible things happen overseas, and we were told to, bunker down in our homes, and we'd never been told anything like that before. We had the entire arts community had they just collapsed. The tourism community had collapsed. There was so much devastation. Do you think that bringing structure into your work like that was a response to that for both yourself and the participants? Possibly?
I hadn't really thought about that before. I don't think so, but if I think about it a bit more, I might have a different answer. But I think for me, it was more that I actually had time to plan. And I don't normally, or in the past, I haven't really had that time or allowed that time. And, COVID really enforced that. And there was also quite a bit of fear for me and around doing it, and doing it in a safe way, and was that okay? And it is my job, so actually I can go and do that, but it still feels a bit that the lines were a bit blurred.
Yeah. And then you touched on it before, but the community pickup was quite immediate, wasn't it?
Yeah, I didn't really promote it heavily at all. I only put it out there twice, I think, on social media. And so, yeah, I really acknowledge that the people involved I either knew initially or I had a connection to, or some I'd never met before, but I kind of knew of them. And then other people came through referrals of the people who were involved. So, and I also acknowledge that, you know, most of the people in the project, most of them were having a more positive experience through this than a negative experience, and that is not the whole community, and certainly the people in the community who are not, you know, it's extremely hard for, which I know there are a lot, and that those people are not going to be part of this project. So this is it's part of it's a bit of a part of my bubble. It might have got a bit bigger, but it's part of my circle. Yeah, I think I've lost the question there, sorry.
Was it was strong. People were interested in
it. Yeah.
People actually verbalised why they wanted to be part of it. And I asked that in context of the arts during times of crisis, and basically I believe that the arts documents, you know, social crisis better than any other form, like, because it is so immediate and you have so many avenues to touch people, or, you know, get to people on different levels of what is happening with them. So I guess it was around that. Like, what do you think people wanted? Why do you think they wanted to be part of it? Did they want to be seen?
Yeah, I think the main driver was that this is a really historic time, and people were very conscious of that, and to be part of, have that recorded was an opportunity they really wanted to take up. I think I would say a lot of people within this are not necessarily people who are seen often, but also being seen, even if they are in the public eye or they have, you know, that kind of life where they're well known, seeing people in their home setting is something I think especially out here, out here where we live in, you know, the valley or whatever, you know, and even people I'm friends with that know, I don't go and hang out with them in their front yard, or some people, you know, you might see them at a cafe or whatever, but spending time in people's just, you know, their actual space in a place where they're having to stay for days and days and days on and not see anyone else is really different. And so I'm not really sure why people, a lot of people did want to show me that, but there was certainly, people wanted to show me all sorts of things. Some people wanted to show me their house that they kind of been a hermit in for a period of time and had not been having a really good time in, and the house had very much got out of control. Wanted me to come and witness that, and afterwards don't want me to actually show those photos, which is fine. But there's something that happens in that process, which is, you know, an important part of that. It's not just about the outcome.
It's sort of, I wondered the other day, because I mean, art is a conversation that, you know, we're all having. And I did wonder, it's almost like these capsule projects, it's almost like community diaries, like in terms of they hold, and it's like when people write a diary, like even Helen Garner, who's publishing her diaries, she still edits them, like she doesn't show everything, but it's often the process of getting it out. And actually, you know, if you're writing your own diary, it's witness to yourself, but for you, you've been being the facilitator, I think, possibly for a lot of people, and the process would have been as strong as any part of this for them, maybe, which is, I'd like to show people, there's a lot of people that haven't seen the magazine at all yet, seeing it's being kept under wraps, and I have to work out whether I'm going to share screen correctly here. I want to show Merlin, if that's all right. I'll just get rid of these. And the reason I want to show Merlin is I just want to ask what it was like to meet and be with someone like that was, you know, he was having a great time, wasn't he?
He was. So, yeah, I feel very privileged to have been allowed to go to where he was living at the time. And, you know, he shared with, you know, I arrived and I had met him once before. Yeah, so living in the bush and arrived and we had a bit of a chat, and then he went inside his dwelling and came out in a green satin robe, and I'd never knew that he was called the Wobbly Wizard. And yeah, and showed me his book, and that was, he didn't want to write. He didn't want to add any other words. He read that out to me, and he said, well, you know, you could write that down. And I said, well, let me just take a photograph of that and we'll use that as it is. Yeah, but certainly that was another scenario of I think that people who are experiencing what we would technically call homelessness would be having this would be a much harder time for those people. And I've no doubt it is for a lot of people, but it's not the case across the board. And yeah, Merlin told me that he and the other man who was staying where he was were having the time of their lives because they weren't being hassled and they weren't being moved on. And they could just be for a little while in one place and be in the bush. And yeah, so it was having a more positive time. Yeah, for them, it was, well, they were certainly telling me that it was a great time for them, and made comments about, you know, what's the word? Personal space is back in style and we really like it. So, yeah, I know, you know, I've certainly worked in homelessness across my career, and understanding that people don't want, you know, there's a lot of, you know, people don't want to be, you know, they want their personal space. You know, that's a thing for them. Yeah.
Yeah. I must say I love your creative decision to actually leave his words like this as a photograph. You haven't converted them to a text piece. And I think that's, I think it says a lot about your work. You're very respectful of what has been asked, what's been given to you and shared. And I think you share in kind that way. Like I think it's something that shows through a lot of your work, that you would never, wouldn't go beyond somebody else's boundaries. It's not about your boundaries as a person and photographer. You're always quite aware of your subject's boundaries when you're putting bodies of work together. And I think as somebody that works with public, like performance and social documentary and street photography, that's, you know, a very admirable and incredibly important and powerful trait that you have and quality, because it means that people have so much trust with you and your work. And I think that shows in this book as well. People, they trusted you. I mean, that's why you're being shown their, you know, old cars out the back and their, you know, madly busy, you know, lounge rooms, and, you know, the homeless guy that doesn't want to talk to anybody is having conversations with you and getting dressed in green satin for a photograph. You know, I think it's quite a particular quality that you have and something to be championed in you. So well done.
It is, it's really important to me. And do you want, I don't know, I might talk a little bit now just about the word people using or having people's stories in there. And do you want me to talk about that now?
Sure, yeah. That was, yes, yeah. Just in terms of, I was interested in the fact that as a photographer, you sort of have to curate so much, and when books are put together, especially from a word side of things, you know, there's always editors involved. And the words that you've allowed people to put in this project are exactly as they've written. Like you've really not edited much at all.
No, I haven't. I certainly didn't edit anything out at all. And the only, you know, if there was a really big spelling mistake that was obvious that I might change it, but grammar, you know, I really wanted people to share it with me as they wanted to and to present it like that because, yeah, that was just really important to me. And, you know, I think it gives you then a different way of how people think and talk and convey their message as well, which is really individualistic. And, yeah, it was really important to me that I don't edit that at all. I struggled with even pulling out the little quotes because, you know, that was suggested to me to do it. And you know, I know that's done in magazines and other forms of, you know, documentation, and it's a really great tool, but I even struggled with that I am then shaping a bigger message there because I am choosing what I think is important, or I could choose what is a negative, you know, phrase or a positive phrase, and I can help shape the message here. So I did struggle with that a little, and whether that's right or wrong, but it's what I did in the end, and I think it works. But I'm just conscious that I do help shape the message there. So, you know, I certainly did pull out some positive stuff. Hopefully, you know, if I pull out negative things, I don't want it to be, you know, it's hard to pull out a negative quote and sit it against a person's image and have that as what you see as the first thing. That, you know, I don't want to portray someone as a, you know, in a negative light.
But it's not so much portraying them in a negative light. It's still their story that you're pulling out. I guess it's just that you're acknowledging that you've got power over the story that they've given you in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
They actually saw that as the most important thing in the 300 words they gave you, or whether it was just the thing that resonated with you the most. So,
yeah. But
I think my comment on that would be the fact that you're even aware of that would mean that you're probably not making the story.
Okay.
Have a quick look here. What I would like to do then, just to move into the book a little bit more, I'm going to, Dakini, I'm going to unmute you now, but give me a moment. I'm just going to read one of the stories from Suzanne's book by a local called Dakini. I'll share that with you so you can see it. There you are. Dakini, random arts activist. As the COVID-19 outbreak began to impact on our everyday life, things changed in ways I think we had never anticipated. In Australia, we usually take our democratic, free lifestyle for granted, and now suddenly our rights were being whittled away as we were subjected to kinds of house arrest for the common good. This made me feel a bit nervous and claustrophobic. I think we've been very lucky to have so few fatalities, and perhaps this is because of the social isolation, but I worry about the long-term impacts for people. I consider myself very lucky. I live alone with my 19-year-old pooch. I have a very small flat and a very large garden. Living in the Yarra Valley and being part of the community gives me many opportunities for encounters with friends when we socially distantly bump into each other in the supermarket, walking chukkers, or riding on the bike trail. I think I would go nuts without these casual encounters. I'm also really glad our local bakery stayed open in Westburn. It's been a bit of a lifeline too. My partner lives across the road, so we get a change of scene. And fortunately, my sister lives around the corner. I wonder how many people are getting along living together, or if they live alone without any community. I've been doing a bit of shopping for elderly neighbours and trying to check in on folks who are struggling. I do worry about my parents and my aunts in the UK and our family in Italy. They've had a much tougher time than we have. And I wonder when I will ever get to see them again face to face. Luckily, technology gives us the opportunity for regular FaceTime chats, but it's not the same, is it? My family lived through World War II, and having bombs dropped and rations, compared to that, COVID-19's restrictions don't really seem so bad. I have felt the need to try and find new ways to creatively connect and spread a bit of love and cheer. In the UK, everyone stands in their drive and claps for the NHS, and they put rainbows in their windows too. Lovely gestures that bring people together and show support for all their hard work. I wish we did something like that. I am glad we have started to put teddy bears out for the children. 1 or 2 rainbows have appeared. I think we have to be creative and ingenious in how we continue to stay in contact with each other. I was lighting candles at the end of my driveway in a candelabra, but sadly, somebody stole it. In times of adversity, I think you see the best and the worst of people. It has not stopped me doing little pop-up art activities. I left ceramic bunnies around the closed playground for kids to find at Easter. I left some Fimo jewellery in the closed skate park. We made 18 poppies for the trees on the Westburn Anzac Avenue of Honour and a wreath of rosemary and eucalyptus for the local war memorial. Anzac Day was particularly poignant this year. On the front porch, by candlelight, at dawn, listening to the service on the ABC with the neighbours. It felt very special. I think participating in these rituals of remembrance and thanksgiving are very important at this time. Thank you, Dakini.
You're welcome.
So Dakini is here now and having a chat with us. I wanted to ask you how it feels now, like that. When did you write that? Would that have been 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago?
Yeah, 6 or 8 weeks ago.
Hmm. And how, if you hearing those words now, would you, if Suzanne approached you today and wanted to do photos and write something, would it be the same piece of work?
It was funny when we were sort of editing it or talking about it, and I was worried it was too wordy. And I reread it. I was thinking, it's funny. I felt very, I guess you get this sort of, we're all in this together feeling, and, you know, that's you're bolstered by this, you're in a crisis and you're coping and you're responding to it, and the adrenaline's going a little bit. And then after time, I now feel very differently, because you just get this kind of fatigue, I think.
Mm.
And it was good for me to, it was lovely hearing you read it, actually. It's like, because it brings that optimism back to me.
Right.
Unlike a lot of people, I went back to work pretty early on. So that has actually made me feel isolated in a different kind of way, because everyone's talking about being at home and their experience of being locked down is totally different to mine, because I've been going to work. So, you know, I'm really glad I've been involved in this project, because it has allowed me to still feel connected to people.
And did it allow you to feel connected because you got to see anyone, or is it just that kind of almost that visceral, you know, that sense of the spider web, you know, that has been being shown who is sitting with you almost at this time?
Well, I think there's a couple of, it works on a couple of levels. There's when I actually saw the photographs for the first time across the road in the apron, when I go to work in the dark and I come home in the dark, and I walked into this, and it just was like this beautiful stained glass window of all these beautiful smiling faces, most of the people I know. And it just warmed my heart. It actually brought tears to my eyes, because and it was this reminder. It's like, yes, we really are all in this together, and I might be feeling sorry for myself, but we're actually all going through this at the same time. And it just felt like they were all there with me, and it was like popping to the market, and there is everybody, and it was just so heartwarming. It was a very special thing.
Beautiful. Do you and you work in the arts, so you have a sense of their purpose or how they work in community as well, and the storytelling aspect of it. Was that part of your sort of background? Did that draw you into the project, or was it purely a personal desire to be part of Suzanne's project? It was more emotional, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I adore Suzanne anyway, and I love her work, and we've been friends for a few years. We actually met doing a community art project together, and I just think she's an inspirational and incredible photographer. So who wouldn't want to have the photograph taken by the Suzanne? I mean, so there's a little bit of that narcissistic, oh, I'm going to have a picture taken by Suzanne, excitement. But also, one of the things I started to do at the beginning of the lockdown, I started to write a diary, and I found myself writing all the statistics of what was going on. So I was thinking of Samuel Pepys's diary, and I was thinking, people will look back on this time in the future, and they'll want to know what it was like for people experiencing it, not just the newspapers. And I think what Suzanne has done is she's done this incredibly intimate portrait of the villages in the Yarra Valley and how they have experienced this, because the headlines won't tell you that.
No.
So I think it's a very important historical community document.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's where the arts is fantastic, at that social documentary, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you think that, I mean, you know, we could talk about the benefits to our own community, and, you know, we could have 10 people immediately agree with us because they'd experienced it just by being in the book, and we know that. But how do you think these projects of small communities then translate to broader communities and other people, like, say, somebody in Melbourne or somebody in Queensland, or, you know, looking at this sort of work?
Well, I think I think anybody can relate to it, because your community is the people who are around you. I mean, I know I've been talking to people in Italy and people in England, and the way neighbours have connected to each other in a way they probably wouldn't have done before COVID. So I think it has got a very wide-ranging aspect to it in that regard. I think anyone can relate to this project. It could be anybody's village, it could be anybody's street, anywhere in the world. Because COVID has affected everybody, we can all relate to what Suzanne's done with this. Yeah.
Suzanne, do you have any thoughts on that, and how you would like to, maybe, you know, a desire, or do you have a desire for it to move into a larger project? I mean, I know you're doing stage 2, etc., for during June for here, for this region. But are there ways that you would like to expand the reach of this project into other communities?
For me personally, to go and take in other areas, do you mean, or this project too? I don't know how that would work. I think I would like to see the work that's happened here have a further, you know, a greater reach. You know, it's great that the local paper picked it up. That was, you know, and they gave beautiful coverage, but, you know, it hasn't been picked up by anyone else. And you know, I think that the documentation we're seeing of this period at the moment falls into just a couple of different genres. You know, there are a couple of different types of work. I hope and I imagine that down the track we'll see lots more, you know, a lot of other different types of work. But I'd certainly like to see it be, because of what Dakini said about everyone can identify, I think, with it. And I'd like to see it, sorry, I'm talking too long. I'd like to see it go a bit more, you know, be a bit more broadly, for what outer Melbourne looks like. You know, it's different to what it looks like in the city, and a way to let people, you know, I think people who live in Melbourne City or, you know, the suburbia they live in a particular bubble, and, you know, this is a much more country setting, and I think it would be great to see how people are living out here and responding as well. As far as me going and doing in other communities, I can't quite imagine how to do that. I'd love to do that. I can't quite imagine it, but I'd love to, yeah.
Great. Well, we're almost done. It's nearly quarter 2. So I just wanted to open it up does anyone have any questions for Suzanne, or would they like to say anything for the last couple of minutes? Let me just unmute yourself if someone would like to say something.
Brooke, hi, it's Sean.
Oh, Sean, hello.
Oh, Sean, I'm shocked it's you.
I imagine that
red wine going on. as true Writers Festival people do. Cheers, everyone.
Dawn, we can't see your head though.
Yes.
There we go. Listening to the conversation, and it's the very end, Suzanne, when you made reference to, you know, the bubble and how this is a very, in a sense, a regional piece. And I'm kind of interested as to, I wonder what your piece would look like compared to someone who had done the same project within, say, Metro Melbourne.
Yes, yeah, in terms of comparing COVID-19 projects.
What would the difference be, do you think, about what as a photographer was seeing?
Sorry, can you clarify? You're saying if I did the project or if someone else came?
Or if you did it, or if someone else did it, and it was the same project, but there are these two different aspects of Victoria. You know, what do you think would be different about what you have taken a photograph of as opposed to the Metro experience?
I'm confused. So,
Look, I'm a patron of the arts, Suzanne. That's what I do.
How's it linked to Chunky Move?
Anyway, so Suzanne,
can you interpret this, please?
What makes this a particular regional Yarra Valley experience that is different to anything that somebody in the city would take a photograph of?
Because where we live is different, how we live is different. We have more space. We have, you know, by vast majority, we have more space. People, you know, we're, I think, very lucky in a lot of ways. In, you know, we can go outside and we can see nature. People in the city, a lot of them, you know, some don't even have windows. Some are living in boxes, and you know, so it's a very different experience. And how you document that would be very, yeah. And I guess that's why the majority of the work that I see that's being created in, you know, city locations in Melbourne are, you know, through windows, because there's not a lot of, you know, it's harder to take, you know, I've got such a world of opportunity out here as far as being able to, you know, the way people live, their animals, you know, I think it's really clear how important people's animals are to them, and that's their family. And, you know, I got to meet so many animals during this project. Cool, it kept me, you know, I really think that fed my soul as well. I felt so lucky and loved that process. Yeah, so I don't know beyond that. I don't know if I was living in the city how I would have done it, or what I would have ended up with. Yeah.
Hi, Suzanne. It's Renata here.
Hi, Renata.
Hi. I was just that question that you asked then. I think there's more a sense of community where you are. There's an openness where people are quite willing to allow you into their life, where in the city, not many people do that. I mean, I live in, you know, in the burbs, and all I photographed was scenery, because there was no one anywhere. Where you go for your walk, and even though you might know a lot of people but not all of them, they're still very welcoming. It's still very much a warm community, a community vibe, if you know what I mean, where the city doesn't have that. I don't feel it does, depending on where you are, but where I am, it certainly doesn't. So I think that warmness, that closeness comes out in your photos more than anything. And I think that's the difference. Maybe not. I don't know.
So Renata's a photographer also, and I noticed that in your photos that you mentioned that you don't see anyone out when you go out walking. So I was really intrigued by that.
Yeah, because I'm very much a person photographer.
Yeah.
So it was quite a challenge for me. But, you know, your work is beautiful because it's just so inclusive of people, and they're so open and warm towards you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
that's how I saw it anyway.
Yeah, I think there's communities within communities, and, you know, not everyone would welcome me to take those photos. But yeah, as I said, a lot of those people I knew or I knew of, or people have referred me on to them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I'd met for the first time as well, which was really good.
Fabulous. Anyway, great. I'll turn myself off.
No, well, I think that's probably, and Dakini, do you mean to have your hand up? to
Yes,
say something, or
yeah,
is that just
if I may
flick of-
can I say something? I just wanted to
Yes,
say
please do.
what Sean was saying, you know, like there was that portraits of New York, and then people went around taking portraits of the village.
Yeah.
But I think there is a real intimacy about what Suzanne's created, and it is her connection to the people that you perhaps couldn't replicate anywhere else. And that way, I mean, my neighbours got in on the act, and they'd never met Suzanne before, and they were so excited to be part of it. And then they may not have been involved in the community without this project, because they're fairly new to the area. So it's made new connections as well. And Suzanne said before, we are a friendly bunch, and you walk around and you walk your dogs. I don't think we have suffered the effects of the isolation of COVID that you might have if you lived in the suburbs. And there feels like there's been a lot more freedom when you hear about people being stopped by the police to and from the shops. We've kind of felt like we can do what we want out here, and we're a bit of a law unto ourselves because we've got so much space, and that's why we're all here.
Yeah, I think space has been a big thing with our particular experience of it, because there's very few people. I mean, there is still a section of people in the Yarra Valley that do live in flats, but they still access parkland very easily, and have still been within the legal, distance to be allowed out and things of that nature. And I think that does affect people's mental health. Hasn't really been an impact on it. Definitely. All right. I'm going to ask everybody to unmute themselves, please. And here's Suzanne.
Well done, Suzanne. Yes.
Thank you, Lisa.
Well done.
Well done. Can't wait
Well
to see it
done,
in the field.
Suzanne.
Congratulations.
Well done, Suze.
Thank you.
Love you.
Well done.
Suzanne.
Thank you.
Oh, you make me cry. It's so cool.
And also, Autumn, I want to tell you all is that there'll be an email that will go out after tonight that will have how you can purchase the book, details on Suzanne's extension of this project, and any other information about how to actually become a patron for Suzanne. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks for helping Writers Festival.
Thank you.
Well done, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Dave.
Bye.
Dylan.